Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to Dark Souls 3. We're now finally out of the Undead Settlement, which is huge. I said that a lot, though. I'm gonna shut up about it. Instead, I'm gonna say I like the Undead Settlement for its size. I mean, there's a lot to find there. But anyway, we're out of it now. We can explore the next area, which is the Road of Sacrifices. It is called that for a reason. It's gonna be a bit more apparent soon-ish. In fact, if we went back to Firelink Shrine and talked to the Crestfallen Warrior, we would actually get some info on that. Meanwhile, these enemies transform if you get close to them, or if you aggro them, or if another enemy aggroes them, which can happen. If you remember those lantern-wielding guys from the High Wall of Lothric, who can just aggro everything around them. There's people like that here too, only they're slightly different. But, you know, you could just attack those bird hollows as they transform. And you can just attack them with impunity, they'll likely die. And we're using a scythe this time, actually. We found it in the Undead Settlement. It was in a small shack on the way to the boss. We had to make a bit of a jump to get to it, but it's all good now. It's a weapon that I've never used before, to be honest, but I quite like it, it turns out. It has a more pronounced sweet spot than most other weapons. If you hit it with the blade, an enemy I mean, then you'll do a lot more damage than you do otherwise. But I think they nerfed it, or rather buffed it. So now it's that if you hit an enemy with a pole instead of the blade, it doesn't do really a lot less damage. Instead, just do slightly less damage, which makes the weapon really useful. That guy up there. You could see briefly there was like a purple-ish cloud, or rather purple-ish. It was completely purple, of course. What it does, if you step into it, it will poison you. That's bad. And that scream you just heard, if those guys weren't transformed yet, and not aggroed, they would have. By that scream. And that's what I meant when I said, yeah, there's people who aggro other enemies here. In fact, that guy did get aggroed by him. And transformed because of him. So if you find those guys, those shamans, I'm gonna call them, I guess, it's a completely valid choice to just, you know, rush them and kill them before they can do anything bad. Meanwhile, you can also do stuff like this. There's people who unironically think that using a bow and arrow, or any ranged form of combat in this game, is playing it wrong. Which I don't think I have to tell you, I think is dumb. But Souls fans aside, this is one of many unique NPC-type enemies that we'll encounter over the course of the game. There's actually quite a few of them in this area alone. I think 3 or 4. I might be off a bit, but we'll see as we go through it. This is clearly a nod to Man-Eater Mildred from Dark Souls, who is just hanging out by town, being naked, attacking you with a butcher's knife, and we just now got that butcher's knife, which we might try out at some point, who knows. We also got some other stuff. These daggers we just found, they are quite useful for a later part, because they give you a bit of a mobility skill. Not sure if we'll use it yet, but we might. So, this little bridge here leads back to where we fought those 2 bird guys. If we drop down here. But we don't want to drop down there. Instead, we're gonna head to the right here, which will lead us to that bridge that we saw briefly at the beginning. I looked at it through my binoculars. Now this guy up there, that's a shaman, and he can actually, of course, just, you know, scream and aggro everybody. In fact, that's not a bad idea. I want him to aggro all these enemies that are around him, because Well, there's a way to easily dispatch him if he does that. Now let's see if he will do it. It's quite random, but usually if you attack him a couple times, he'll just start screaming instead of poisoning the nothing that is in front of him. Twice. Yeah, he'll do it over and over now. And I don't think that was the scream that I was thinking of. Ah, well. See, there's some couple enemies over there, but there's another easy way to take care of them, because there's a bit of a way around. And of course, there just had to be dogs. Now, if you have a shield and can block the first attack and then attack them, they're not much trouble, as I explained before. Now, okay, I said there won't be much trouble, but yeah, you can see what's happening here. Now, this might be a decent, you know, decent spot to use the Force Miracle that I still have equipped, but you know, we didn't think of it at the time. And there he screams. Now, those guys will just charge us. And if you drop down here, they'll either drop down there with us and be a bit groggy from the landing, or they'll just jump straight into the death, like the other guy. That guy still almost got us, though. It normally works out a bit better. It's just that I wasn't quite used to the weapon yet. The scythe has some swings that just kind of get held up by the geometry. If you use a weapon that you know how to use, that won't happen. Or if you use a weapon that doesn't have any wide swings of the sword. And yeah, they can grab. I keep forgetting that. You can't block that, which is annoying. They rarely do it, but if they do it, it can get you, or will get you rather, because you're gonna be blocking. And of course I kicked that dock down, and I have never seen that happen before. You know, just gonna deal with that. But over here we actually get a Divine Tome, in fact a Braille Divine Tome, which we can give to Arena. Now that's a second tome we got. The first one was the Londor Divine Tome, which we don't want to give her, because she won't handle it too well. She'll take it, she'll teach us the spells, but if you want the good ending for her side quest, you shouldn't give it to her. We will still be able to get the spells eventually, though. Alright, and now we're done with the first little bit of the Road of Sacrifices. And as far as I'm concerned, it's actually one of the harder parts of the Road of Sacrifices, so that's debatable. There might be other parts that other people find significantly more difficult. Anyway, next to this bonfire, we actually have 2 NPCs. It'll actually give us some insight on what the Road of Sacrifices is exactly.
Oh, hello. How do you do? I am Anri of Astora, unkindled like you. This is Horace, a friend and travelling companion. Are you too in search of the Lords of Cinder? We are well along the Road of Sacrifices. Below us is the Crucifixion Woods. Beyond the flooded woods lies Farron Keep, home of the Undead Legion. Further yet is the Cathedral of the Deep. We seek the cathedral, home of the grim Aldrich. We may go our separate ways now, but we are both seekers of lords. The next time we cross paths, one may find the other in a time of need. May the flames guide your way. Oh yes, Horace. He's not very talkative, but don't think ill of him. He's an upstanding, kind-hearted knight, a fine partner for this grueling journey. Without his help, I would have cursed this onerous duty long ago. We are well along the road of sacrifice.
So two things about Henri. First off, she was giving us a little bit of false information, or rather misleading information, because she makes it sound like the Cathedral of the Deep is beyond Farron Keep, which is not the case. There's actually a split in the path here. One leads to Farron Keep, the other to Cathedral. The other thing is that Henri, well, she actually will only be female if we play a male character, which is why I chose a male character. I just like the idea of her being female better. And her voice is better as a female as well. Meanwhile, if you play a woman, Henri will suddenly be male. There's a reason for that, we'll be discovering that, but I don't think it's a very good reason. Also, Horus gave us the Blue Sentinel's Covenant item, which allows us to now help people in the way of blue. It's an auto-summon thing, I never did it. According to some people it doesn't work ever, and according to some other people it works really well. And of course it was very clever of me to plunge attack this guy from such a height that it would kill me if he got hit one more time. No, it might be clever to just, go the long way sometimes. These hollows with the big sticks, they can be quite dangerous because they have a lot of range and they can actually charge you, which hits you multiple times and can do quite a number on you. But if they hit once, you're usually good to just wail on them until they're dead. But their charge move you just saw, it can be quite devastating if it hits you, and it goes on for a long time. And this is their other charge move, the one that I mentioned earlier. But yeah, once they attack once, just wail on them. They'll likely die because they're just normal hollows essentially. Anyway, we're now on, well, still on the Road of Sacrifice, technically, but the part we're in right now is called the Crucifixion Woods. Those guys with the big sticks essentially are probably carrying their crosses or something, I'm not sure. We will find some grave markers here, stuff that resembles crosses, I don't know. Still, it's the Crucifixion Woods, and it leads on to the Cathedral of the Deep, which is where Aldrich of the Deep resides. He's mentioned in the intro cinematic. He's that big, blobby, gooey thing. Now, if we had talked to the Crestfallen Warrior, or rather we will still do it, he'll tell us something interesting about him. And that he only became so big and gooey by developing a rather unsavory habit of just eating people. Now, this turned him into goo. How it did that, I don't know. He just got really, really fat and then turned into that thing. And that's actually where the sacrifice part comes in, because these sacrifices, I would assume, are the people that he eats. Which is kind of, being moved along the Road of Sacrifices to his cathedral. And these mushroom enemies here, they were actually in Dark Souls 2. They are pretty much just insects with the appearance of a mushroom. But they're pretty harmless. They're really slow, they can barely do anything to hurt you. As long as you just attack them first, you'll kill them. And if you have a weapon with a wide swing attack like me, you can just kill multiple of them at the same time rather easily. So it's not a problem at all. The most difficult part about this area is probably that there's a lot of trees around, which means that there's potentially some enemies around every corner. And even if you go back to a part that you think you've explored, you might be off just a little bit and run into an area with enemies again. Another problem is that a lot of these stick hollows will actually walk. They don't just stand still. They walk around. Usually they walk towards the direction of the Cathedral of the Deep. But sometimes they just go a bit off the path. Others yet, like those here, just stand around and do nothing in particular. Some of them are just freaking dogs. You know what I think of dogs. Which is I like them, but not those. But all this stuff about dogs aside, you probably couldn't help but notice that there was a big lake as we entered this area. It's right here in front of us, but that's not actually a lake. Rather it is. It's just very shallow and you can walk all the way, you know, to the middle of it. It's not gonna get any deeper, we can just walk everywhere. Naturally, there's a lot of treasure to find there, but we're gonna go there right now. But if you want some specific things, there's some good stuff, some of it rather close to the shore, so if you want specific items, you can just pick them up along the way without even having to go, you know, in there. Meanwhile, we're already fairly close. In fact, it's right here to our third bonfire this session. To be fair though, the first one was the one we started at. But that doesn't change the fact that there's a lot of bonfires in this area. And look at that. Giant crabs. Now we can attack them from here. We can even attack them a lot from here. But the thing is, if you attack them too much while being on land, they'll just burrow underground and, you know, come back up at a different spot. And they'll be at full health again. If you want to fight them, you actually have to get up close and personal and stay in the water. If you step outside of the water, they will just burrow down under the earth. If you accidentally step on land though, that's not a biggie as long as you get back into the water rather quickly, because they'll give you a bit of time before they actually do their thing. And yeah, this building, you might be inclined to believe is the Cathedral of the Deep, but it's not, it's just some ruins. The Cathedral of the Deep is a much larger area. In fact, it's gonna be the next area that we're gonna visit after the Road of Sacrifices. We could go to the Farron Keep as well, but there's a reason for us to go there second. Now, interesting fact about those guys that I noticed as I was going through this area again later. You can just get really close to those guys there. Those weird crucified hollow guys, I guess I call them. And you can just wail on them and kill them. Because they won't actually do anything to you unless you get really close to them. That guy here, we're fighting right now, he's the one that will actually aggro if you get really close to him. The other one, I've never really aggroed him, to be honest, without attacking him at least. And it's all worth it, of course, for getting an Estus shard. Those guys can also drop Titanate charge, by the way. In fact, these stick hollows can as well, but they have a lower chance. Not that these guys have a very high chance either, but it's much higher, and sometimes they'll even drop 2 items, because they can also drop embers. And while embers aren't really a good item in my opinion, you might disagree with me. It's just that I don't care if you have a bit lower health. Some people need the extra health. So it's of course welcome to me too, because having more health is always nice. Being embered, of course, also invites invasions, so if you're scared of those, just don't. Or play offline. I don't mind invasions too much myself, though. Even though I'm not a big fan of PvP in this game, and I haven't been a fan of PvP in the first 3 games either. Or rather, 4 games if you include Bloodborne, and I'm not a fan of it now. I don't think that the developers actually meant for PvP to be that big of a thing. It's just a feature they had, and it was unique at the time, and people liked it for that reason. Meanwhile, I always played the games as single-player games, because when I played Demons and Dark Souls for the first time, I could not actually connect my console to the internet. But now it's time to actually head inside those ruins. Because we've pretty much walked around them already. This is not the only entrance to them, but it's probably the one that most people will use. And I spoke about those lantern guys from the high wall earlier. Yeah, that was one of them. And having to fight all of those hollows at the same time can be quite annoying. They're weak, but they're many. But those hat guys, well, they tend to cast spells, and they're always aggro. They don't need to be aggroed by some lantern dude. And they wear a big hat, I said. Well, do you remember Big Hat Logan from Dark Souls? He was a... well, even in the times of Dark Souls, he was quite legendary, though he was still alive. He was one of those sorcerers that everybody kind of knew. And his trademark was he wore a big hat. Now, he was also fascinated with immortality, and Seath the Scaleless, who had attained immortality. At least some form of it. Now, Seath went mad because of his own research, and Logan studied that research, so he went mad too. Last time we saw him, he was naked, with his hat still on. Anyway, NPC time.
Well, this is unexpected. I don't often have visitors. What do you want? This is my study that you've happened upon. If you haven't any business, I've reading to get back to. How intriguing. You'd better not. Sorcery is not for everyone, and should never be forced. You have your own methods. Sorcery need not be one of them. Don't let it bother you. Be on your way, then. You're unkindled. Shouldn't you get back to your duty?
Okay, first things first. So that's because he called us an idiot, basically. We need at least 10 intelligence for him to actually be willing to teach us spells. And we will get that much intelligence later, but now we don't. Which is too bad. But we're not gonna use sorcery for a while anyway. We might later. Nothing is impossible after all. But anyway, I could have dropped down from up above or sniped those enemies from up above, but I think it's much easier to just hide behind those pillars and just, you know, kill them that way. You can go in kind of a S pattern through those pillars if you want, but you need to look out. On the other side, there's one pair of pillars that has a hole between them, which will drop you down to a little bit of an area with one of those crucified hollows. And that can actually kill you, because you might not know he's there. Now, obvious that I told you that he's there, he's not gonna be a surprise. Anyway, more of those big hats. We'll find quite a few of those big hats here, actually. Now, we could go up there, but we're not gonna explore the rest of the ruins for now. We're just gonna head on. And here we have another big hat. Now, this is the Crystal Sage. The Crystal Sage uses spells that utilize crystals in some fashion, much like Seath the Scaleless and the spells that Big Head Logan derived from his research. Now, many people thought that this was Logan. The Crystal Sage is not Logan. But the Crystal Sage, as well as all those other people with big hats, however, they're people kind of following the footsteps of Logan. But anyway, this is a boss fight. It's fairly simple, you can stagger him rather easily, in fact. Just move up to him, attack him, and, well, pretty much stun locked. However, once at about 50 health, something happens. The Crystal Sage will clone himself. The clones can be easily spotted by, you know, casting blue magic instead of purple, but the thing is that killing the blue ones will not actually do any damage to the health bar. But they'll die in one hit. It's best to actually kill the blue ones first, because if you wail on the purple one while the blue ones attack you, that can just, you know, go south really easily, really quickly. Because they do deal a lot of damage with their spells. They're easy to dodge, but they hit really, really hard. And it's, of course, not exactly a good idea to just, you know, ignore the fact that he also has a melee attack. If you use a really heavy weapon for this fight, I recommend actually also bringing something like a dagger, so you can easily take care of those, you know, blue guys in just one hit with a really fast weapon, without being, you know, committed to a really, really heavy long swing. Because that can actually make the difference between life and death. However, if you make sure to take care of the blue ones first, this fight is one of the easiest in the game. Not the easiest by far though, and not the easiest in Dark Souls as some people like to say. It's not that easy. Dying is something that very well may happen, and it won't be because you're bad, probably. And if you have a really high damage output, you can probably kill him in 2 or 3 cycles. 4 or 5 are much more common though. The highest weapon that you can have at this point is a +4 weapon, I think. I may be wrong, because technically you could also go to different areas, but the path we took would allow us to make a +4 weapon. Our scythe though is at +3 right now, because I didn't want to use my large Titanite shard, which I only have 1 or 2 of at this point. One thing that I don't like is that this boss just kind of disappears if you hit him enough. I mean, it makes sense, the fight would be incredibly simple otherwise. And since this is not a melee using boss, he doesn't really have a lot of stuff that you need to dodge. Well, he does, but it's easy to dodge because it's range attacks. But anyway, not too difficult of a boss, but interesting. You'll notice that most bosses are more unique than, say, in Dark Souls 2, where a lot of them were just straight up fights against some armored guy. Here it's just that every boss kind of has their own flavor to it. And next time we're gonna explore the rest of the Road of Sacrifices, or most of it rather. So, see ya again when we do that. For those still here, let's have a look at the weapons that you can make of the Crystal Sage's soul, but first let's actually read the description of that soul. Soul of a Crystal Sage, one of the twisted souls steeping in strength, used to acquire many souls or transposed to extract its true strength. The twin Crystal Sages once served as spiritual guides to the scholars of the Grand Archives, and one went on to ally with the Undead Legion, which is the one that we fought. Now the thing that you can make of it, well, one of them is the Crystal Hail, which you know, just saw a bit of. The description goes as follows. It's a unique sorcery developed by extraordinary preacher twins known as the Crystal Sages. Cast a cascade of small crystal soul masses from above. Crystal soul masses have piercing qualities. In a pact said to have been formed long ago, one of these sages allied with the Undead Legion in order to train the sorcerers of Farron. Now the spell itself is, well, it's okay, I guess. Here it actually does kill all of the enemies, because this is a character that's basically, you know, endgame level strength. Was my caster build who used sorcery all throughout the game. Which is why he one-shots those guys now, but normally the Crystal Hail isn't very powerful. It's a more useful tool to harass people, I suppose. Like maybe even to use in PvP, just cast it to kind of control where they can and cannot be. Then again, it might not be that useful in PvP because I don't know anything about PvP. Anyway, moving on to the other weapon. The Crystal Rapier. Or rather, the Crystal Sage's Rapier. A thrusting sword with tiny crystals scattered across its blade, used by the Crystal Sages for self-defense. The crystals boost the magic damage inflicted by the sword, and the item discovery of its wielder. Fruit of the lifetime of research conducted by the sages. Now, it's a rapier. It's a thrusting sword. It does what thrusting swords do. And it does so reasonably well. Does some magic damage too, scales with intelligence. I suppose it's an option if you play an int build. Though I haven't really tried it myself. What actually makes it good in my opinion though is its secondary ability. Not that stance we just saw, I mean that's just kind of nice, that's the weapon art. But it has a passive skill, it just increases the item find. Which is incredibly useful. Now you might be saying, okay, but what if I don't want to use that weapon? What if I think it sucks? What if I can't really deal damage with it? Well, even if you don't upgrade it, it does that, and you can't just put it in your offhand. You can even just two-hand your main hand weapon and it'll be, you know, it still counts. As long as it's in the weapon slot, in your left or right hand, it will actually count. However, only if it's the active slot, of course. But you can put in your offhand, two-hand your weapon, or just use the one-handed moveset with a weapon you won't use in the other hand, or you can even upgrade both weapons and have a rapier in your other hand and attack with it. Just a wild idea though. I'm not sure if it holds up. Anyway, won't be using this for the LP, but I might occasionally just use it to get some better materials and stuff. Anyway, that's it for the weapons. See you next time.